Welcome to Social Aloe Ministries, where we are committed to glorifying God while exposing the devil. One of the most important things for us to learn in life is to choose our battles wisely. Because if we go into a battle that the Lord did not send us into, it's typically not going to go well for us. There are times when we have to learn that we have to fight, and then there are times to be still and let the Lord fight for us. And it helps to inquire of the Lord regarding what He wants us to do. And there are even times when He will allow us to go into battle, but He will establish a limit of advance, so to speak. So we can only go so far in that battle, because if not, we may end up falling with the enemy. And a very good example of this we can find in the life of David. In 1 Samuel 16, the Lord had anointed David to be Israel's next king. And you flip to the next chapter, in chapter 17, there was an issue with Goliath. That battle was actually Saul's battle, but Saul didn't fight it. But David showed up, and he took care of Goliath. And that battle took David from obscurity to a position of prominence. David went from being a shepherd to, in some cases, you could even say that his own family didn't know him, to a man who was celebrated all over the country. But King Saul became jealous, and he tried to kill David on numerous occasions. But even though David was a warrior, and he would have been just in killing Saul, he did not. He was choosing his battles wisely. And it was good that he let the Lord fight the battle for him. Again, we not only have to choose our battles, but we have to take the appropriate action when it's time to fight and when it's time to stop fighting. Or just not fight at all and let the Lord handle it. In 1 Samuel 27, this is what David resolved to do. Because even though he was fleeing from Saul, Saul did not know how to choose his battles. Because in 1 Samuel 16, the Lord had Samuel the seer anoint David as next king. And him persecuting David, chasing all over the country trying to kill him, he was trying to kill God's plan. So not only was he fighting against David, but he was fighting against God, which is very important. A part of choosing a battle is knowing who you're fighting against. In some cases, you're fighting against a messenger of Satan, so you're fighting against the devil. But if you're fighting against a messenger of God, then you're fighting against God. And when I say messenger of God, someone who's actually doing what the Lord has called him or her to do. Because there's some people who, it may seem as if they're serving God, but they're not. And it's not based on their title, it's based on their actions. So in 1 Samuel 27, starting verse 1, and David said in his heart, I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than that I should speedily escape into the land of the Philistines. David was willing to run into the hands of the enemy in order to escape from Saul. How bad things had gotten for David to resort to do that. And Saul shall despair of me, to seek me any more in any coast of Israel, so shall I escape out of his hand. And David arose and passed over with 600 men that were with him unto Achish, the son of Maoch, the king of Gath. And David dwelt with Achish at Gath, he and his men, every man with his household, even David with his 2 wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the Carmelitess, Nabal's wife. And it was told Saul that David had fled to Gath, and he sought no more again for him. There are some things that I said that may not have struck you. but they certainly struck me. We talked about David fleeing with his two wives, Ahinoam and Abigail. Those were his second and third wife. Because if you remember, King Saul, as a part of his plot to kill David, had him go out and kill at least 100 Philistines so that he could marry his daughter Michal. When David fled from King Saul's court, he ended up leaving Michal behind. And if he had taken Michal with him on the run, I can imagine that Saul would have been more aggressive in terms of trying to kill him. So David left his first wife, Michal, behind, and he ended up marrying two other women. Saul was still chasing after him. The other key thing is, David went to Achish, the king of Gath, and he lived there. In a sense, he couldn't have gotten any deeper into enemy territory. And here's why I say that. In 1 Samuel 17, in verse 4, and there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose span was 6 cubits and a span. So a 9'6" tall Goliath from Gath, who had, or you can say that he had family in Gath, and now David was living in Gath. And he was safer there than with Saul. David was safer in the area with any remnants of Goliath's family than he was with Saul. Wow. But there's more. When David fled to Gath, the Philistines were going to fight the Israelites. David wanted to go into that battle to fight with the Philistines. But the other princes of the Philistines did not want David to go with them because they feared that he would turn on them. So Achish sent David back to his home, Ziklag. David did not get to fight in that battle, but it was a blessing in disguise. There are times when you want to fight a battle, but the Lord won't let you fight. And it's a blessing in disguise. And I'll cover something else after I review this. So the staging of the battle, that's 1 Samuel 29. In 1 Samuel 30, starting verse 1. And it came to pass, when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag, and had smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away, and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captives. So if David had been fighting the Israelites while siding with the Philistines, he would have come back, and in a sense, it would have been a hopeless situation. Because it's bad. They came back, the city was burned, and their wives and the rest of their families were gone. However, skipping down to verses 7 through 8, and David said to Abiathar, the priest, Ahimelech's son, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. And David inquired at the Lord, saying, Shall I pursue after this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, Pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all. A couple of things, and we can also learn a lesson from this. David asked if shall I pursue this troop? That's the first thing. Then he said, shall I overtake them? You have to be careful sometimes how you ask the Lord questions, because he may answer your question, but if you didn't ask it correctly, you may get an answer and you think that things are going to work in your favor, but they won't. So the Lord may end up sending you into a battle, and we see an example of this in Judges chapter 20, when the Israelites were fighting against the Benjamites. And the Lord even told them the first time around, send the tribe of Judah, and the Judeans were defeated. The Lord sent them a second time, but it was on the third time where the Lord told them that he would give them the victory, and they defeated the Benjamites. So in this case, David asked if he should pursue the troop and if he will overtake them. And the Lord told him, yes, go into battle. Not only that, but you'll be successful. Now with all that going on, David, well, the Lord has spoken, so when the Lord speaks, it comes to pass. So David and his men recaptured or caught up with the Amalekites and reclaimed their families. If David had been fighting against the Israelites, then he would have probably never had seen his family again. The other point that I mentioned earlier that I want to bring up is sometimes people are engaged in fights, and in a sense they're not watching their back, or in military terms, they're not watching their six. Sometimes you see ministers who, for example, they may be counseling people regarding their marriages, but their marriage is falling apart. They may have a ministry that's reaching out to children, but their children can't stand them. I've heard it said that our first ministry is our family. A lot of times we're so focused on external battles that we're losing the internal battles. If David had been busy fighting against Saul, his family would have suffered. So I pose this question to you. The battles that you are engaged in, what are those battles ultimately costing you? I say again, the battles you are engaged in, what are those battles ultimately costing you? In some cases, ministers are in battles trying to save their reputation, and it's killing their character in the process. And when I say killing, maybe a more accurate word is it is exposing their character in the process. Because they show their ugly selves while trying to preserve their reputation. If you're in a ministry, do not be focused about what people have to say about you. It's actually none of your business. Even if they're calling your name, it is none of your business what they're saying. Your business is to be in right standing with the Lord, to make it so that if anyone's saying anything about you, that either they're telling a lie or they're talking about stuff that is way in your past, stuff that you've repented of, and who knows, maybe the Lord has chosen to forgive you of. And I know it's hard. When I mentioned before about getting in battles, and the Lord may allow you to get in a battle but not go too far, establishing a limit of advance, sometimes the enemy will drag you into battle and drag you down to his or her level, and you truly want to go there. Choose your battles wisely. Ensure that the Lord sends you into those battles. And if he sends you, be careful about any instructions that he gives you. If he tells you not to exceed a certain limit, do not exceed that limit. Choose your battles wisely. David, he saw Goliath. Saul wouldn't handle it, so he did. That was great. The Lord was with him. One rock killed Goliath. When Saul was persecuting David, David could have killed Goliath, or David could have killed Saul, but he didn't. The Lord handled that one. when David was with the Philistines and they were about to fight the Israelites, that wasn't David's battle. David had a greater battle within his home that he needed to tend to, and he did. Jesus said that with the Pharisees and the scribes, that they strained a gnat and swallowed a camel. If you're fighting the wrong battle, you're going to end up losing the war. And there are other examples in the Bible that I could have given of how people were lured out of their village. And then when they looked back, they saw their village on fire because they had been ensnared. So you had to be careful. Please follow the Lord's instructions. In some cases, the Lord may have you do something that is against your nature because it may seem like cowardice. The Lord may want you to stay locked up in your house. And if that's what he says, do it. It's kind of like this. If a thief comes into your house and you have a weapon and you end up killing the thief, it is viewed differently than you stepping outside the house and firing your weapon at someone. So there's a difference. If someone is attacking your ministry, you don't have to go to their ministry page and stuff and start posting things. You don't even have to speak about them. But if they're attacking your ministry, then that means they're an aggressor. The Lord sees us stuff, and he will handle that. There's some things I'm not going to say, but just know the Lord is watching. And he is a judge. A lot of times it may seem as if he's taking a long time to render judgment, but when he judges, it is swift. And his judgment is usually far worse than anyone could have bared. But they usually get a lot of chances. I'm going to do what I call a dismount of my soapbox. I hope this helps, especially if your ministry is under persecution from those who seek to slander you. And by slander, I mean telling lies. Because I've heard people talking about people are slandering them. No, you're not being slandered. People are telling the truth about you. And it's not a past truth, it's a current truth. The Lord, he's watching.